And Zambia, if you're not familiar with it, here's Zimbabwe, and Congo is up there, and Angola. So it's a landlocked country in south central part of Africa. And the city of Kitwe, which is the second largest city in Zambia, is where I did my ministry. And with the people that live in the suburbs, which is poor people, that's where third world countries, that's where the poor people live, is in the suburbs. And anyhow, it's been quite an adventure working with people and staying in contact with them. And I wanted to share some pictures, just a few pictures of the people that I met there. And that main person that I came in contact with, his name is Cosmos, and his wife Mary, and I'm sorry I don't know which child this is. He's got 3 of them, and this has been taken several years back. And he's holding a Bible that I brought. I'd asked him, what did you want me to bring from the United States? And he wanted to study Bible, and so I brought him a nice leather-bound one there, and in this case it's still in the box because he just valued it so much. But you get an idea of the countryside or what that part of town looks like by looking in the background there. These homes are adobe brick. They make the bricks themselves, the blocks, to make their homes, and they're generally very small 2-room homes with a tin roof. It's generally fairly temperate there. I go in October, and that's their dry month, although sometimes when it rains it's not so dry. But anyhow, a dry, hot month, and that's when this was taken. Anyhow, they're good friends, and I stay in contact with them almost weekly through internet and emails, things such as that. Next picture. This is a woman that I spoke about before. Her name is Gift, G-I-F-T, just like you received a gift perhaps at Christmas time. And she really is a gift. And I wanted to share this picture with you because in the background is this wood structure. They don't build too many wood structures there because they're not permanent, because they have termites galore there. So wood structures don't last very long. And I want to share with you, this is a school that she operates. It's a longer building, but it's not a huge building by any means, but it's segregated into different rooms. And she's standing in front of a pile of blocks because she has her heart set on building a school out of blocks, something that's more permanent. And anyhow, so next picture. And this is just a picture of some of the kids. And you can see how crude things are. Here's the bench that they're using to do their work on, and the bench they're sitting on is made out of wood, probably the same wood as the walls. You see how daylight comes through the walls. If I was a little boy, I'd be captivated by what was going on outside, because I used to be a little boy that was captivated by things that went on outside. But they're good kids, and you see they kind of wear a school uniform. That's just kind of a tradition there. Sometimes the people are so poor you wonder where they get the money for the uniform, but they do have them. I asked her here recently, how many teachers do you have? And she said she has 4. Now I don't know if she's not counting herself in the 4, so I'm assuming she also teaches. So there's 5 teachers there teaching from what we would call preschool through the 8th grade. And they have 283 or 84 students. So if there's anybody who teaches here in the United States, you know that's a boatload per class. So anyhow, I just wanted to share that with you to give you some idea. And do I have one other picture? Yeah, that's correct. I had asked prayers and financial help. The state government, Zambia is requiring that she puts in more bathroom facilities. When we think of bathroom, think of outhouses or toilets. That's what it is. And here they're in the process of building them. And she sent me these pictures just to show me the progress that's being made. And they're almost complete with the outside. I think the next picture shows more the outside. Here they've got the walls and they started in on the ceiling. They still have to do the flooring. I don't know what they're doing. I would think that they do it all at the same time, but they're going to put toilets in there, and I just tell you the truth, there's going to be a 5-gallon bucket of water and a dipper pail, and when you get done with your business there, you're going to dip water in and pour it into the toilet because there's no running water plumbed into it. You can kind of see this ditch right here. You see what's in that ditch? All the plastic, all the stuff, garbage. I hate to say this, but there is a real ministry in those parts of the world just for the environment. They don't really have a garbage service in this part of town, and so they're either raking it up into piles and burning it, or just let the rain carry it off into the rivers. And anyhow, just pray that one day that they have a clean environment like we do. This town, this city is, Kitway is centered in the Copper Belt region. They do a lot of copper mining and refining in that area, and they use a lot of sulfur dioxide in the processing of the copper ore. And so they have acid rain like we've never seen before, farm equipment. The tin roofs, everything is rusting badly because of it. So it can't be very safe to breathe either. So pray for the people. The average lifespan really isn't that long. 36 for men and like 40 or something like that for women is the average lifespan. So my friend Cosmos is getting close to the end of his life on the average. He's about my son's age, about 40 years old. So keep him in prayer. Anyhow, I was asked to share a message with you today, and thinking about what I wanted to share, something important that's close and dear to my heart. It's about evangelism. Oops, I let the secret out. The sermon title, I think I have a title page on it, is What Time Is It? I've got a birthday coming up. I'll be within 2 years of when my own father passed away. So it makes me think about time, you know, how much time do we have left? I love an hourglass. We don't see many of them nowadays, but I love an hourglass because it tells us not only how much time has gone by, but it gives us an idea of how much time is left. None of us knows this part of the equation. I remember seeing a joke of a barber giving a man a haircut, and he says, "There's a date back here." Talking about the back of the head, there's a date back here. Do you want to know what it is? Wouldn't it be nice if we knew what our date is? Anyhow, what time is it? Let's go on to slide number 2. Time can be described in 2 ways. It can be part of a day. For example, is it morning, noon, or 9 in the evening? You know, we carry watches, or it's on our cell phones, or in this case, there's a clock in the back that lets us know how much time I've been speaking. I mean, it tells us what time it is. So we use clocks to measure time, but there's other ways to measure time as well. Let's take a look at the next slide. For example, it can be help define a season. Is it spring, summer, fall, or winter? We're kind of in that transition time now. Beautiful day out there with the sunshine. It feels like spring, but we know we just came into January. Winter can come back with a roar, can it? Or is it peacetime or war? I think that passage in Ecclesiastes that talks about the different seasons. There's also childhood, a time to be a teenager, adult, a senior, or even the elderly. There's different seasons of life. And so I want to think about, what does the Bible say about time? Let's see that next slide. Looking at Psalms 90, verse 12, it says, "Teach us the number of days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." we only count those things, when I think about it, we only count those things that are limited. I count the hours in the day, days in the month, dollars in the bank, number of people in the family. There's only a limited number of those. We don't count those things that are unlimited. We don't count the grains of sand on a seashore, nor do we count the drops in an ocean. We don't count the unlimited. We count only the limited things. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom, the psalmist says. Well, the New Testament also has something to share with us. Out of Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15 and 16, Paul warns us, be careful then how you live, not as the unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Well, we don't hardly pick up the newspaper or turn on the TV and watch the news or see something splash across the internet to realize that there is much evil in the days today, and same as there was during Paul's days. Be careful then how you live, not as the unwise, but as the wise, making the most of every opportunity. So I want to share with you some of these things. We'll go to the next slide. As a church, whoops, a little high there, that's okay. As a church, we have worship and the word down pretty good, but how about love for our neighbor? And doesn't that include telling them about Jesus? I don't know why it is. I think it's a trick of Satan that teaches that this life is all there is, when Scripture repeatedly tells us that there is more yet to come. In fact, whatever we experience here, whether it's 10 years or 110 years, is but the beginning of eternity. And so, when Jesus talks about life after this life, he knows well what is going to come. And so, like many other churches, we have worship and the word down pretty good, but how about love for the neighbors? And doesn't that include telling them about the most valuable treasure there is, telling them about Jesus? Let's go on to slide number 7. And I threw this one in just because, well, that's what the church ought to be. It ought to be a mix of people from young to old, of all nationalities. I saw a news item on Christian Post, the Christian Post, which is a Christian website with news items affecting the church. And they talked about the Pew Research Center. Pew Research Center does research, in-depth research on religious topics. And they wanted to check and see how is the United States doing in the matter of Christianity, religion in general, but Christianity in specific. And this is what they found out. They did a phone survey. It says religious landscape of the United States continue to change at a rapid pace. A Pew Research Center telephone survey conducted in 2018 and 19 showed that 65% of American adults describe themselves as Christians when asked about their religion. This is down 12 percentage points over the previous 10 years. Meanwhile, the religious unaffiliated share of the population, those people who describe their religious identity as either atheist, agnostic, or nothing at all, now stands at 26%, up from 17% in the year 2009. So that portion is increasing. It said that both Protestantism and Catholicism are experiencing losses in the population share. Currently, 43% of adults in the United States identify Protestantism themselves with Protestantism, which is down from 51% in the year 2009. And 1 in 5 adults, or 20%, identify themselves with the Catholic Church, which is down from 23% in 2009. Meanwhile, the subset of the religious unaffiliated population, group known as religious nuns, have seen their numbers swell. The self-described atheists now account for 4% of the U.S. adults, up modestly but significantly from the 2% in 2009. And agnostics, those people that aren't real sure, they kind of straddle the fence. You know, atheist says there is no God, and agnostic says I'm not really sure. They take the easy way out. Well, anyhow, the agnostics make up 5% of the U.S. adults, but that's up from 3% a decade ago, while 17% of Americans describe their religion as nothing in particular. And that's up from 12% from 2009. And yet, members of non-Christian religions have grown modestly in their share of the adult population. So it'd be Muslim, Jews, Wiccans, Buddhists, whatever else would fall into that non-Christian category. And so I just wanted to give you, an overview of what's taking place here in the United States. In a way, I don't feel too bad about that, the decreased number of people that identify themselves as Christians, because I think people are being more honest nowadays than they used to be. They've done surveys in the past where they go in and do surveys of churches, and they find that up to 20% of the people that were attending and had attended on a regular basis had made no active commitment to Christ. So they asked him, well, why do you come here? He said, well, it's just a habit that we got into, so we just do. It's kind of like some people go golfing and some go watch a baseball game. We go to church, well, because you made a commitment? No, just because that's what we do. So I appreciate the fact I think people can be more honest nowadays than they used to. We are not the Christian nation we used to be, in a sense that allows us to see people for who they really are. They don't have to put that front on anymore. When I took a look at what's happening in Grandview, I couldn't find information about Grandview itself, but I could for Yakima County, and it was very revealing. From citydata.com, talking about Yakima County, it says 55% of the people who live in Yakima County have no religious affiliation. 55%. Well, the Northwest, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska are the least churched part of the United States until you get way over on the East Coast. The New Hampshire, Connecticut area also is very unchurched. In Yakima County, 24.5% identify with the Catholic Church and 15.5% identify with the Protestant, and 4% identify as others, so that'd be Jehovah's Witness and Buddhist and all those other groups. And so that just gives you a category. If you're a life insurance salesman and 55% of the community didn't have life insurance, you'd say there's good prospects out there, wouldn't you? Guess what? We're in the life insurance sales business. We've got something to share with other people. I used that word one time in a group of ministers. We're going around introducing ourselves, and I just wanted to be kind of lighthearted and funny because it's all a group of ministers. What do you do as a minister, you know? So I'm a preacher, whatever. And I said, well, I'm a fire insurance salesman. You know what? Those guys got just absolutely ballistically mad at me. That idea of a salesman, that's what he keyed in on. I'm just trying to tell him I was trying to keep people out of hell. Let's go on to the next slide. Sorry, it's stretched beyond our screen there. It's a passage out of the book of Acts. If you're familiar with the book of Acts, it starts with Jesus with his disciples. Jesus rises up in the clouds and leaves them. and sends the apostles off to do the work the apostles are supposed to do, to start churches, bringing people to Christ. There was a man by the name of Saul. He was named after a king, a previous king of Israel. Saul wasn't a very good king. He looked like a king. He was head and shoulders above all other people. If you wanted somebody to look prestigious, Saul would have been the man you chose to be a king. But his heart was not for God. And he led his people astray. So David became king after him. Many years later, a boy was born into a family, and they gave him the name Saul. He would later in life become the Apostle Paul, but before he was the Apostle Paul, he was the Saul who persecuted the church. And it talks about this. It says that there was a time when a great persecution broke out. Against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout Judea and Samaria. Godly men buried Stephen. Remember, Stephen was murdered, and deeply mourned him. But Saul began to destroy the church. Later, Paul would say that he was the worst of all sinners, for he persecuted Christ's church. It says, going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women and put them in prison for believing in this Jesus Christ. Now, if I was going to fill in the rest of the story, I would say everybody fled for their lives, went to the hills, and renounced Jesus Christ. But that isn't what they did. This is what's amazing. Verse 4, those who were scattered preached the word wherever they went. And I always marvel at that passage. They were not intimidated by being persecuted. They continued to share the message of hope. You know, sometimes I think that part of the problem with the American church is it has not undergone enough persecution. I'm reading about churches around the world. If you understand anything about the communist system, a communist government by nature has to be atheist. The communist government substitutes themselves for God. All people underneath the communist rule has to bow down to the government. And therefore, because of that, they want to eliminate all other religions, in particular Christianity. And so, if you read anything about the Soviet Union, they spent 70 years persecuting church leaders, the church, and Christian followers, oftentimes sending them off to Siberia where they died there. Same thing happened in China. They closed the borders, people couldn't get in, they couldn't get out. They persecuted the church that was there. People wondered what's happening to Christians, what's happening to the church. When China finally opened up in the 1970s, they estimated that there were about 30 million Christians worshiping in house churches there. It endured the persecution and continued to be Christ followers. Makes me wonder if the United States shouldn't have a time of persecution too. Sometimes persecution is a real cleansing element in itself. Anyhow, here we have a case from the book of Acts, where as the people were persecuted, they scattered and preached the word of God, preached about Jesus wherever they went. Let's go on to our next slide. So the question is, if we're really concerned about our neighbors, who are our neighbors? Are they those who live close to us? That's what the normal definition, or at least in our mindset, what a neighbor is. Those within our community, perhaps it's not those that's next to us, but within our community. Is it our family? Or neighbors, even those who live halfway around the world? I received this email from Cosmos before I even knew who Cosmos was. Remember, he was a black gentleman with the Bible in his hand and his wife. He had questions. He was asking me about the Bible. He didn't know who I was. He found our church website, and evidently there was something that attracted him, and he had questions about the Bible and leadership, church leadership and things like that. And so we started daily conversation. In fact, sometimes it was multiple times in the day. He would send me a text or an email, and I'd email him back, and here comes another question. And this went on for about 6 months until I thought, you know what, maybe I need to go visit this guy. I'd never been to Africa before. Been to Central America, but never as far as Africa, but I had set my heart to do that. And so getting a friend to go with me, Jerry was his name. He'd never been to Africa either. We booked tickets, and off to Zambia we went, and it was quite a reception we got there, complete with flowers. It was quite a deal. But anyhow, even though it was halfway around the world, I had to tell him one time he wanted me to settle a dispute in the church. They're having problems, issues with leadership. Imagine that within a church, huh? Anyhow, and I said, Cosmos, you're 9,000 miles closer to the problem than I am. I can't see what the issue is. You guys need to settle this yourself. Anyhow, so yeah, even those halfway around the world, we need to be concerned about. Next slide. So, it was scrunched down a little bit. It just asks the question, how do you move something big? You know, we've got this problem. It seems like a big problem. We want to evangelize, but we don't know how to do it. So how do we move something big, in this case, like a barn? How do we move it? And so, you know, you either leave it set or tear it down, or how are we going to move that barn? How are we going to move our problem? Let's go to the next slide. Well, I like this slide, and evidently Kurt had seen it previously too. And this is the actual case of somebody that moved a barn, and I think it was in Nebraska, if I remember correctly. And they just built railings all around the side. That's part of what you're seeing there. And then they invited the community to come help. And if you look, there's men and women. There's somewhere I saw a young kid. Anyhow, there's young people, old people. Everybody got together and put their hands on the bracing that was put around this barn. I think there's 300 and some of them. And they picked it up and moved that barn like 100 yards. It was in an area that kept getting flooded, and the farmer wanted to move it. They picked that barn up and moved it. If you looked at it, you'd say, well, there's no way anybody can do that. Well, when everybody joins together, everybody put in their little bit, and they can get something big, like a barn moved. In the same way with evangelism, you know. Jesus talks about, you know, you'll reap what someone else sowed. And I love the guy, but I think he's done us a disservice. Billy Graham, you know, maybe you've even been to Billy Graham rally where he has thousands of people come. And he gives this invitation and thousands of people come down front. And so that's set in our mind that if we don't have something similar, then we're a failure and we can't do that, so we're not going to even try. When in truth, people are one heart at a time, one life at a time. In fact, if you think about it, we have a very small part in the whole process, because I honestly believe that if God and His Holy Spirit's not working on the person's life prior, they're not going to accept what we have to say about Jesus anyhow. And most of the time, what we share, what we should be sharing, is our personal story, how Jesus has changed us. And so my story will be slightly different than your story, and your story will be slightly different than someone else's, because it's a personal encounter with the living God. So I have this woman in this community where Pam and I are living, kind of a retirement community, senior community. You have to be over a certain age to live there. I'm past that age. Anyhow, and she's all by herself. Her husband's passed away about 10 years ago. She's estranged from her daughter. Her health is failing. All she's got is her and her little dog. She thinks God is angry with her. Otherwise, why is she hurt constantly every day? And so I share with her. Not all the time, but every time I go over, I try and lead with the words, God loves you. God cares about you. And she'll say something, and people do this, that throws up a wall to block that. But I want her to hear that there is a God above who cares about you. And one of these days, I'm going to have a chance to talk about Jesus with her.